Hey everybody, this is John from Nari Games, and in this video I'm going to do something a little bit different. Normally I'm talking about my game, Wild MMO, but today I'm going to talk about content management systems. So what this video is not going to be is a compare and contrast. Really use whatever makes sense for you. My only recommendation is don't take on a bunch of technical debt for something like this. But other than that, whatever makes sense for your use case. For me, Drupal made all this in the world. As an architecture, it does some things really, really well, and other things maybe a bit of a stretch. But for a data-driven application where you have a lot of interrelated entities, it's really quite stunning. So let's take a look at some of the things it does. What you're looking now is the website. I spent all of an evening building it, so please don't spend too much time looking at the UX. It's certainly subject to change. And at any rate, any content management system is able to be reskinned pretty much at will. Um, but you're looking at really the architecture of the content itself in this video that I'm talking about. So you're looking at a location, in particular a dungeon. This is the Whispering Shadows Cloister. It's an early dungeon that you'll see in Wild MMO for early level characters, and it has a lot of interrelated data. It has the location where this dungeon is, a place called the Eastern Mountains. It has a number of creatures in this particular dungeon. Right now, all skeletons of different kinds. It has a quest, at least one quest, that we have in the database at least. And all this data is interrelated. So I can kind of jump around between them, and the connections. From the dungeon, I might jump and take a look at, one of the monsters. The Bone Blacksmith is as a mini boss. You can see from the Bone Blacksmith, it's related to a creature family called Bones. That's all the skeleton types that you'd see. I can go ahead and jump back to Bone Blacksmith. You can see it's related to a quest. There it is. Quest is related to an item, these leather gloves, and so on. Right? So I can kind of go back and forth between the data, and that's kind of the point. This connectivity, what we call reflection of data across your different types of entities. Let's take a look underneath the hood and see what it looks like from an editorial perspective. Again, I didn't spend any time on this UI. I just kind of banged out the data model in an evening. But you can see you've got some basic stuff. I've got a title. I've got the family, which is again relational. I've got the quests, 1, 2, 3, however many quests I want to add. I can add in, additional data to this thing called a creature or a monster, and store it and relate it to other things. Now, the important thing is that by listing quest here, for example, who is the overseer, any data that is now associated with the Bone Blacksmith is also going to be retrievable or usable from the quest itself. So it's that, again, that connectivity of data that I'm really going after because I only want to do it once, right? I'm going to do all the modeling of content here and be able to pull it wherever I need to. The rest of this is all kind of basic, got images and descriptions and stuff like that. But that's the basic idea for entering data in Drupal. You build these screens which have a bunch of fields on them. The fields can have some functionality behind them. In this case, connecting them to other content types. So here you can see at least the beginning of some of the data modeling. So you looked at Bone Blacksmith. Let's jump into the creature. So if I wanted to add a new field, I'd come to this screen and add additional fields. I could reuse a field, and that's got important concepts. Reusable fields means that as I create the definition for that field and reuse it across multiple content types, I can reference it in the same way. I can theme it in the same way. Basically, I can save myself time by reusing a field. But if I want to create a new field, let's say, if I click create new field, I've got kind of the primitive types. Of course, I can extend this, create all different types of fields, and so on. But I'm going to create a simple drop down. This will be plain text drop down. Let's call this thing something like, let's see here. How about reward tier? So tier 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of thing. I might reuse that data in various ways. Of course, display it, but also maybe drive some logic with it. Further on down the line. So that's that simple to add new fields. And now that field is available both in the UI, if I wish it to be displayed on the web page, and also to be available in the API. So let's switch to that because really this is the number one reason why I chose Drupal. Drupal excels at being something called a headless content management system. Headless means that you don't have to display it on a website. Of course you can, but you don't have to. It's not tied in that way. And so all the data is available through something called a view. A view can drive data in lots of different places. You can see front pages of view, for example. All those kind of interrelated blocks that you saw on the creatures are views. But I'm going to go to the API endpoint for items in particular. This is what is being integrated into Unity that you saw in the in the brief video I put up last weekend. It's got a standard API pattern. If you look at almost every API, it looks something like this. You've got a route or a path to it. Maybe you have an optional token at the end, which lets you drill further into the API. So I can interrogate it right here and say, like, for example, show me all the items in the database, all the items. And there's just one, of course, right now. But I can go ahead and look at a specific item by giving the asset ID, and it'll just pull that one item, right? So that's kind of basic pathing. You'll notice that there's some authentication there, so I can wrap that route with authentication if I wish to. I can add relationships to this. So again, I'm looking at an item, so maybe I might pull the quest-related data that's attached to that item. Again, it's all relational. Choose what fields are going to be displayed in the API, and really importantly, normalize that API. And what I mean by that is when I'm writing for the client, that is inside Unity, I don't want the Drupalisms. I don't want anything to do with Drupal that's kind of like hard coded. So the client defines the data, and the client says I want something called item type, and so I can give it an alias and spit it out that way, the way the client's expecting it. So that's kind of an important consideration when you're building APIs. The rest of the stuff is all kind of straightforward. I can filter it further, so I'm only looking at published content. I can have a different API, perhaps wrapped with authentication for staged content later if I wish to, and so on. So this kind of API building is fundamental to the application I'm building for integration with Unity. So let's switch over to the new Unity client, or the one I've been working on, because I've made some changes since you last saw it. So polished it up a bit, added in things like settings panel, which pretty straightforward, and I've got this concept of last sync. So I was thinking about my implementation, and my naive implementation was to pull down all the items. I'm going to iterate through them. I'm going to compare them to the assets, the scriptable objects related to items inside of MMORPG Kit, and look for comparisons and see what's changed. But what I want to do now is track the last sync, the last time I synced this thing from the client. And what I really only need from the API is things that have changed since the last time I synced, right? It's going to be a smaller set. Imagine I've got thousands or tens of thousands of items. I don't want them all to go over the wire. So let's go ahead and quickly change the API. It's really, this is really why I chose Drupal to use Drupal here. So I'm going to change that contextual filter, remove the asset ID, put in changed. That will now be what's driving. I can have a configuration around this. In this case, if I have no changed, I'll show you everything. But if you give me a date, then I'll only show you stuff that's changed since that date. That's the basic idea here. Lots of configuration settings here, which I'm not going to go through. But the idea here is now I've changed the API that quickly. Let's go ahead and test it. We'll try all again, and that should, of course, bring back everything. And it does. But I can also put in, just the date, and that'll only pull things in that changed since that date. So it's really that simple for me to build out APIs and to interrogate this data and change it as I need to. And that's really is the whole point. Because it's going to be an iterative sort of thing, right? I'm not haven't defined it all up front. So let's click the button. Now it's syncing. You can see that no items have changed since the last time I synced, which was about 16 hours ago. It means I haven't been in Drupal editing content, and that works exactly the way I expect it to. So that's basically it. Again, whatever works for you is what's the right answer. But for me, this entity modeling platform called Drupal is the ticket. Have a good one. Bye.